The Ghost of Willow House. The House on the Hill. Hello friends, welcome to the Horror Ghost Stories. The story begins. It was a cold night in November when Lucy, a young journalist, arrived at Willow House, a sprawling, decaying mansion perched atop a hill. It had been abandoned for decades, its reputation as the haunted house of the town almost as old as the building itself. Local legend told of a tragic death. Eliza Harrow, the last of the Harrow family, had died in the house in 1923 under mysterious circumstances. Some said it was an accident, others whispered that Eliza had taken her own life. Since then, no one had dared to live there, though people claimed to see her pale, mournful face in the windows on quiet, moonlit nights. Lucy had come to Willow House with a single goal: to uncover the truth. She had heard the stories from her grandmother, who lived in the nearby village, and the journalist in her couldn't resist the lure of such a chilling mystery. Armed with a camera and notebook, Lucy made her way up the overgrown path toward the mansion, the wind biting at her skin as the trees groaned in the breeze. When she reached the front door, she hesitated. It was half open, as if inviting her in. The house seemed to breathe in the cold air, exhaling with a faint, eerie creak. Lucy stepped inside. The smell of dust and mildew hit her like a wall. The hallway stretched out in front of her, dark and narrow, lined with faded portraits of people long gone. The air was thick, oppressive. As she turned on her flashlight, the beam revealed splintered wood and cracked walls, but it also revealed something far more unsettling: a sound. A soft, muffled sound, like something or someone moving just out of sight. Lucy froze. The sound was coming from upstairs. "Get a grip," she muttered to herself, trying to shake the unease crawling up her spine. She had come to investigate, and she wouldn't let fear stop her. She grabbed her camera, switched it on, and began snapping photos of the decaying grandeur around her. The second she took a picture of the grand staircase, her flashlight flickered. The light dimmed for a moment before it came back on, casting long shadows across the hallway. When Lucy turned to continue, she saw it, the faintest impression of a figure at the top of the stairs. A woman, her face obscured by long, dark hair. "Hello," Lucy called, her voice trembling. But there was no answer, only the soft shuffle of footsteps retreating down the hallway. Her heart pounded, but curiosity won out. Lucy made her way toward the staircase, her camera held tightly in her hands. Each step creaked under her weight as she ascended, the air growing colder with every footfall. When she reached the top, the hallway stretched out before her, just as dark and empty as the one below. The feeling of being watched was palpable, and the silence was suffocating. But then, the air shifted. It wasn't still anymore, it was heavy, thick with something Lucy couldn't identify. She continued down the hallway, toward the first door on her right. The door creaked open with a slow, agonizing sound. Inside was a bedroom, the furnishings covered in dust and cobwebs. A large, four-poster bed stood in the center, the canopy torn and hanging loosely. But there was something else, something strange. In the far corner of the room, a rocking chair moved slowly back and forth. Lucy's breath caught in her throat. She stepped inside, the air growing colder as she approached the chair. It creaked again, as though something unseen was sitting in it, rocking gently. Then, without warning, the door slammed shut behind her, the force of it making her jump. She turned around quickly, heart hammering in her chest. The door was locked. Panic began to set in. "Who's there?" she shouted, but no one responded. The room was silent except for the rhythmic creak of the rocking chair. She grabbed the door handle, desperate to escape, but the door wouldn't budge. It was as if the house itself was holding her inside. She turned back to the rocking chair, her eyes drawn to it like a magnet. That's when she saw it. The woman from the hallway. Standing behind the chair, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes wide and hollow. Her mouth stretched into a slow, agonizing smile. Lucy opened her mouth to scream, but the sound was stuck in her throat. She stumbled backward, her body colliding with the door. The woman's smile widened, her eyes unblinking as she stepped closer. Lucy could feel the temperature plummeting around her, the air growing thick and suffocating. In a panic, Lucy grabbed her camera and snapped a picture. The flash illuminated the room, but when the light faded, the woman was gone. The rocking chair stopped moving. The door was still locked. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a voice soft, barely a whisper echoed through the room. "Help me." Lucy's heart nearly stopped. The voice was hollow, desperate. She turned to the window, but it was too dark to see anything outside. The voice came again, louder this time. "Help me, or you'll never leave." Lucy's legs gave way beneath her, and she collapsed to the floor. She could feel her pulse pounding in her ears, the oppressive weight of the room closing in around her. She had to escape. She had to get out of here. Her eyes darted around the room, and that's when she saw it, a faint outline of something etched into the floor, half hidden beneath the bed. With shaking hands, she crawled toward it, her flashlight barely illuminating the markings. As she brushed the dust away, she gasped. It was a symbol, an intricate design, with strange runes surrounding a single, jagged shape in the center. The floor around it had been scratched and clawed at, as if someone had tried to escape. The voice came again, but this time, it was closer. "You shouldn't have come." The door behind her rattled, as if something were trying to break through. Lucy bolted to her feet, her heart racing in her chest. She ran toward the window, but as she approached, the glass began to frost over, thick layers of ice spreading across the surface. Her breath came out in ragged gasps as she realized the house was alive, as though it had been waiting for her. She turned to the door again, only this time, the woman stood in the doorway, her face twisted in a grotesque mask of anger. Lucy screamed as the air turned frigid, and the shadows in the room reached out, wrapping around her like cold hands. She turned to run, but the door slammed shut once more, trapping her inside with the thing that had been waiting for her. And then, as the final moments of her life slipped away, she heard the voice one last time, "Help me, or you'll never leave." Lucy's heart raced as the temperature in the room dropped even further. Her breath misted in the air, and she could feel the cold creeping into her bones, gnawing at her flesh like the teeth of some unseen beast. The woman's figure in the doorway hadn't moved, but Lucy could feel the malice radiating from her. The air itself seemed charged, heavy, as though the house itself was breathing, pulsing, alive with an energy that was not human. The walls groaned, the floorboards creaked, and the sound of the rocking chair in the corner began again slowly, almost lazily, rocking back and forth as if mocking her. Lucy backed away from the woman, her eyes darting around the room for any means of escape. But the only way out was through the door, and that was blocked by the thing that had once been Eliza Harrow. Her pale face, obscured by long, wet strands of hair, now seemed impossibly still. Her eyes, dark and hollow, stared straight into Lucy's soul. "You shouldn't have come," the voice whispered again, now more of a growl than a plea. The words reverberated in Lucy's chest, like the sound of a drum, pounding deep within her. The door rattled as if something outside was trying to get in. Lucy spun around, her mind frantic. The air grew suffocating, every breath harder to take, as if the house itself were closing in on her. She stumbled backward toward the bed, her fingers grazing the cold, rotting wood of the frame. As she did, she heard a sharp, jarring sound. A scrape. The walls of the room seemed to ripple, and the floor cracked open in a single, violent jolt, like the yawning maw of some hungry beast. The floor beneath Lucy shifted, and a deep, unnatural growl vibrated through the ground. It was as if the house itself had awakened, and it was angry. The woman in the doorway smiled. It wasn't a smile of pity or of warning. It was the smile of something ancient, something beyond human, and Lucy could feel its malice in every fiber of her being. With a sudden, jarring movement, the rocking chair stopped, and the woman was in front of her, standing only inches away. Lucy gasped, her heart racing. The woman's face was inches from hers now, and her breath icy and fetid blew across her skin. "You will never leave," the voice rasped, its tone filled with an unnatural finality. Suddenly, the room seemed to distort, as though reality itself was being stretched and warped. The walls seemed to twist in on themselves, growing longer and narrower, the corners bending and folding. The ceiling seemed to sink lower, and the floor felt as though it was rising up to meet her. Lucy's breath came in sharp, panicked gasps as her mind screamed for escape. She ran to the door, throwing herself against it, but it wouldn't budge. Desperation surged through her veins as she grabbed the handle and yanked with all her strength. It was locked. She spun around again. The woman was standing in the center of the room now, her eyes locked on Lucy, her smile wide and cruel. The shadows in the room had deepened, and in the corners, shapes moved, dark, contorted shapes, reaching out with spindly fingers. "The house will keep you," the woman whispered, and this time, the words felt like an icy hand gripping her throat. "You will be part of it, just like the others." Lucy staggered backward, her back hitting the cold wall of the room. The shadows in the corners began to shift more violently now, twisting and writhing like living creatures, and something from deep within the house groaned an inhuman, agonizing sound that filled her with dread. She felt the walls closing in, the floor trembling beneath her feet. The woman in front of her was no longer just a woman. The figure began to distort, its limbs elongating, twisting like vines. The face morphed, the skin peeling back to reveal a skull-like visage, with glowing, hollow eyes and a mouth stretched impossibly wide, revealing jagged, sharp teeth. Lucy's mind reeled. She could hear her pulse pounding in her ears as the woman the thing reached toward her, its fingers turning to claws. In a blind panic, Lucy grabbed the camera from around her neck and began snapping photos, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The camera's flash illuminated the room, revealing the monstrous figure in stark, white light. For a split second, the thing recoiled, but only for a moment. "No!" it hissed, its voice now a guttural snarl. "You cannot escape." But as Lucy snapped another picture, the thing recoiled once again, this time with more force. It screeched a high-pitched, inhuman sound that tore through the silence of the house like a knife. Lucy realized something in that moment. The camera, the flash, it had an effect on the thing. She wasn't sure why, but it was the only weapon she had. She aimed the camera at the thing, snapping photo after photo, each flash illuminating its grotesque features and causing it to flinch and screech in pain. With each flash, the room seemed to shake more violently, as if the house was protesting, trying to tear itself apart. The floor buckled beneath Lucy's feet, the walls cracked, and dust and debris rained down from above. "You don't belong here!" Lucy screamed, her voice hoarse with fear. The thing lunged at her, but just as its claws were about to reach her, the flash of the camera exploded in a blinding light, filling the room with a deafening roar. The light vanished. The room was silent, the temperature returned to its normal cold, and the shadows seemed to recede. Lucy stood in the middle of the room, trembling, every muscle in her body tight with terror. The thing was gone. The rocking chair was still, and the floor was intact. The walls no longer twisted, and the air felt still. Too still. Lucy collapsed to her knees, exhausted and terrified, but the worst was yet to come. As she tried to steady her breath, something caught her eye. A shape. A shadow at the edge of the room, barely visible in the dim light. It was her. The woman stood in the corner of the room, not smiling now. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, full of something dark and vengeful. Lucy turned to run, but the door now unlocked was still in front of her, and she bolted through it, her feet slipping on the old wooden floors. She made it down the hallway, her pulse racing as the walls seemed to close in around her again. The house was alive, and it was coming for her. She reached the front door, her hand flying to the handle. It was open. "No." A voice whispered in her ear, a voice filled with hatred. "You can't leave. You will never leave." But Lucy didn't stop. She didn't look back as she ran through the overgrown yard and down the path, not stopping until the mansion was nothing but a distant silhouette against the dark sky. When Lucy returned to the town, she tried to tell her story, but no one believed her. They said Willow House had been abandoned for years, and that nothing could survive there, let alone haunted. But Lucy knew the truth. The house wasn't just a place of sorrow or madness. It was alive. And as she lay in her bed that night, trying to sleep, she could swear she heard the faintest rocking sound from somewhere far in the distance. And just before she drifted off, she heard a voice soft and insistent, like a whisper on the wind. "You will return." The end.